Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
It really amazes me sometimes when I think of the number of leaders who forget who they lead. And I don't just mean the category that they lead, whether it's soldiers or it's mechanics or it's nurses or it's doctors or it's civilian workers. There's a whole plethora of understanding that goes with being a leader and knowing the niche of the people that you lead. The DISC personality profiles is a good example of that. The colors and the animals and the strength finders. And there's so many ways to look at leadership on the relational level. But sometimes I think leaders straight up forget that those they lead, like themselves, are human. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. And as I usually do before I start this program each morning, I spend some time watching what's going on in the news, what's going on around the world. I usually use social media for that, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or whatever I can get my hands on, just to see what's out there this week, what's going on today. And I saw two very interesting video clips, one of them from a foreign country. I believe it was Italy, but I could be mistaken. The firefighters, on the back of their jackets, it said Pompieri. I don't know if that's Sicilian or if that's Greece. I'm not exactly sure. It's not a word I'm familiar with. But I do know they were firefighters because I've been one and I know how they dress, and they were firefighters. But they were called Pompieri. So if you know who that was, drop it in the messages down below, because I don't know exactly where it was from. But what was fascinating about the video was that a 14-year-old child showed up at the scene where the firefighters were busy lowering a rope into a drain pipe that probably wasn't 12, 14 inches in diameter. And they lowered the rope several times, and with only an empty rope coming back up, I guess it's like when I go fishing, I throw the line in the water and nothing happens. So they decided to add to the rope a 14-year-old boy tied at his ankles. And they put a harness on him, and they tied the rope around his legs and around his ankles to make sure they could extract him again. And then, like a Superman dive, he went into this tiny pipe into the ground, and they lowered him all the way to the bottom where he did his own fishing expedition. And up he came with the toddler who looked like maybe a year old. That's quite a fishing trip. That's also quite a frightening and yet harrowing experience for a 14-year-old to dive headfirst into a pipe barely big enough to breathe in. Why did he do it? Do you think he was bribed? Do you think he was forced? Do you think he had no choice? I think not. I think the reality is there was something in his heart who said, at the bottom of that pipe is a human in trouble, and I have the capacity to help. None of these full-grown, broad-shouldered men are going down to that 14-inch pipe. It ain't going to happen. But I can squeeze in there, and like a cat with bendable vertebrae, in he went, and out came the child in trouble. Now, I want to ask you, as a leader, how often have you forgotten that those you lead are, like yourselves, human? And they may find themselves in trouble from time to time, and they need rescuing. Maybe it's emotionally, maybe it's relationally, maybe it's financially, maybe they just need a little bit of grace in the way that they're conducting their affairs where you lead them, at work, in volunteerism, whatever that is. Maybe they found themselves in the bottom of a deep hole, and they're not sure how to get out of it. And it doesn't matter how many lifelines are dropped down there, or pacifiers are dropped down there, or excuses are dropped down there. They just don't have the opportunity, like the donkey at the bottom of the well, to step on the dirt until the dirt rises them up. They don't understand that that's what is going to get them to the top, is climbing on the adversity. And it may require someone going to extreme measures, like a 14-year-old boy being lowered down into the pipe to bring the child up. It's not the first time that a child has fallen into a place like that. I believe her name was Abby, who fell in the well when I was 14 years old. I remember seeing the news coverage on that and how they went to such great lengths to get that child out of the well that she'd fallen into. Now, the first thing that we think is, well, how did she get that close to the hole in the first place? How did this toddler get that close to that hole to get into that pipe in the first place? Well, if you have toddlers, you know they wander. They do things like that. The people that you lead, they have the same bizarre proclivities. You have the same tendency when they fail, when they stumble, when they find themselves in a hole they can't get out of. You think to yourself, well, how the heck did you get there in the first place? What were you thinking? Why would you jump into a hole where you don't know where the bottom of it is? I saw another Facebook clip of some guys who were standing on the top of some round bales that were stacked. I don't know how tall they were stacked. Most round bales are standing on their end about 6.5 to 7 feet tall. But these were stacked tall enough that a guy decided it'd be funny to jump between them. And he vanished from camera sight. I don't know if he went down 20 feet or 40 feet or how far he went before he got to the bottom of what he jumped into, but the camera couldn't find him anymore. And now you have to ask yourself, if he did that knowingly, how does he plan to get out? I'll never forget hearing the thud on the wall when my boys were little. And I heard that thud the first time and I thought, it sounded like a sonic boom, but we're not close enough to an airport for that. That was just weird. And I kind of walked through the house looking for it. I couldn't find it. I went back to my chair. A couple minutes later, bam, there's that same thud again. It was the strangest thing I'd ever heard. I got up and wandered through the house again, and nothing. My wife and I just looked at each other quizzically, and finally I sat back down in my chair. Just as I sat down, bam, there's that thud again. This time I realized it was coming from the other side of the wall, right next to my recliner, which is where my boys slept. And so I snuck around the corner, quietly getting to the door, quickly opening the door and flipping on the light to find my older son sitting in the middle of the floor in his tighty-whities, laughing so hard he's about to wet himself in a pile of pillows. His younger brother, not quite 4 at the time, on the top bunk in his undies, diaper, whatever it was, and a football helmet. In the starting blocks on the top bunk, foot against the back rail. And just as I look at him, he launches himself. Bam! The bed hits the wall. There's the thud. And he flies across the room, only to land in the pile of pillows next to his brother. And I looked at him and I said, "Boy, what are you doing? You're going to hit your head on the ceiling fan." And he looks me in the eye and he goes, "Dad, that's what I'm trying to do. That's why I have a helmet on." Now, as a leader, you've got to realize there are people in your group of those you lead who make the same kind of, for lack of a better term, irrational decisions. They know exactly what they're planning to do. It doesn't make any sense to anybody else. It ultimately could be dangerous. It could be a massive fail. But they're determined to do it anyway. Like jump between the hay bales, jump off the bed with a helmet on. This weekend there's also another tragedy. This time, a group of teenagers, all underage, decided they wanted to get revenge on someone else and, steal some cars and stuff in the process. And between 12 years old, the youngest perpetrator, not victim, and 17, the oldest perpetrator, not victim, there were shots fired and lives taken by a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old. And I have to think of the child at the bottom of the well, and I think, how did they get there? Was it intentional? Was it wandering? Did they jump like off the bales of hay or off the bunk bed, fully knowing what they were going into, or fully understanding that they were about to do something but unable to understand the consequences? See, as leaders, we need to understand that there are people that we lead, some directly, some indirectly, who are making conscious decisions with no comprehension of what the long-term ramifications could be. Maybe they actually have an agenda of their own, and it doesn't suit our team, and it doesn't benefit what we want to accomplish, and it doesn't reach the end goal or the vision that we've set out for them, but it is what they intend to do. That's a whole different set of problems. But nonetheless, they're humans. Sometimes they're just going to make mistakes. Sometimes they're going to make bad decisions. Sometimes they're going to make decisions that they feel are the right decision, although their decision making is ill-informed or misled or manipulated or cajoled by someone else. All of those are problems that come with being human. All of those are problems that we as leaders need to address. All of those are problems that can lead to much bigger problems when we don't think about the consequences. One of the consequences of leadership that has really kind of racked my brain for a while is this balance between being an effective leader. Some think of General MacArthur and that kind of pound it home type of leadership. Some think of the football coach, the screaming and the yelling and getting people to do what you want by, more exercise, like the coach who lost his job because he exercised the kids into the hospital. Using exercise as a form of discipline. Some want to simply let people kind of go their own way, and if they fall in a ditch, well, we'll get them out. But we don't want to offend them. We don't want to push them another way. We certainly don't want to get too close to them and create a relational problem that could become a conflict. We don't want to get into any of that. And we'll lead from over here and they do their thing over there. And if there are major consequences, then we need to defend the organization, and that may mean cutting them off altogether. And if they find themselves in harm's way or in the bottom of a pipe or between hay bales or making bad decisions on a weekend with the wrong people, well, we may have to cut them off because they could bring a risk, even if it's just a reputational risk to our organization. We still have to remember, they're human. Many of them have other lives depending on them, depending on their income, depending on their stability, depending on their well-being and their mental health. See, another fascinating video I watched this morning was on LinkedIn. It was called "Don't Forget the Importance of a Hug." Don't forget the importance of a hug. Now, the irony was that all of the hugging in this video, all of it, was being between humans and animals. Oh, there were hugs with ducks and with geese and with alpaca, with kangaroos, even an elephant, even lions hugging humans. And while that's a fascinating thing to me to see a lion hugging a human and not making a meal of them, I'm curious how a 7-minute video had no humans in it. Have we lost the ability to have normal human relationships that might include a hug that doesn't become inappropriate, that doesn't become a contention or a conflict? Have we lost the ability to remember that the people that we work with every day, whether it's a handshake or a side hug or a high five, that those humans need human contact? That as leaders, we should be at least empathetic enough for a high five, a handshake, or a hug in an appropriate way? Or do we leave empathy to the 14-year-old willing to dive into the pipe? I think the question almost answers itself when we look at a 12-year-old and a 17-year-old who have so little human life contact, so little relationship, so few hugs, that they're willing to take the life of another to get their own way, to win at whatever game they were playing in their own minds. That, my friends, is a failure of leadership. Whether it's parental leadership, it's cultural leadership, it's societal leadership. I'm reminded again of the story from Jack Canfield's book, Success Principles, of the guy who jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge. And after he had committed suicide, they went to clean his house and they found among his effects a sticky note that said, "If someone smiles at me today, I won't jump." And the power of a human connection to realize those that we lead are just as human as we are, just as prone to error, just as prone to mistakes, just as prone to bad decisions with horrible consequences. And we need to remember that. And we need to honor that. And we need to do that with empathy and with understanding and with grace. And when appropriate and available, with a hug. If your cat needs it, your kangaroo needs it, your dog needs it, your elephant needs it, your lion needs it, your alpaca needs it, the baby goats need it, humans need it even more. Watch the videos sometime of free hugs. And the number of people who just burst into tears. No words are said, no inappropriate touching is done. But just the fact that they get a hug from someone for no reason at all can make their day. Leaders are human. We make mistakes. We do stupid things. We say stupid things. We act like humans. But we also hurt. We also fail. We also celebrate. And sometimes we forget that the people we lead, the majority of those are humans too. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day and be a better human.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
Hi, my name is Christina Knowles, and I just got done taking J Loren's Storypower Masterclass. It was amazing. I took away so much information. One of the things that I really enjoyed being formally trained in media many years ago is the call to action. I will use that with every speaking engagement, and I'm so grateful that Loren just spoke truth into his teachings, and he is a true professional. And I know this might sound weird, but I've been taking certifications in different classes over the years, and Loren is not boring. I can't even believe I got here at 9, and then the class went by so fast that I was like, it's time to go already? And I was shocked that it was time to go already. So it's an awesome class. You're going to enjoy it, I promise.
Loren is a master teacher on storytelling, and I learned so much. I'm really going to have to sit down and go back through everything, and I think I might have to have some more coffees with Loren, but it was totally worth my time.